fourth behavior is observing without judging. You watch. You listen. You notice patterns. But you don't comment. You don't call them out. You don't announce what you've seen. You just quietly collect data. And this is one of the most unnerving things you can do to a toxic person. Because they know you're watching. They can feel it. But they don't know what you know or what you'll do with that information. Most people either ignore red flags or immediately confront them. Both responses are manageable for toxic people. Ignorance means they can continue. Confrontation means they can defend, deflect, or gaslight. But silent observation is different. You're not ignoring, you're cataloging. You're not confronting. You're assessing, and that assessment is invisible. They can't defend against accusations you haven't made. They can't gaslight observations you haven't shared. They just know you see them. Really see them. And being truly seen is toxic people's worst nightmare. Because their entire strategy relies on hiding their true nature. They wear masks. They perform. They craft narratives. And as long as people believe the performance, they maintain power. But you don't believe it, they can tell. And not knowing what you'll do with that knowledge keeps them off balance. Paranoid. Careful around you. Because people who observe silently are collecting evidence. And evidence has power. Power they can't control. The fifth behavior is refusing to fill silence. Someone says something manipulative. You don't respond. Silence. They wait for you to break it. To explain yourself. To defend. To engage. But you don't. You just let the silence sit there. Heavy. Awkward. Telling. And this is psychological warfare. Because humans are uncomfortable with silence. We're wired to fill it. And manipulators use that discomfort against you. They make an accusation. Then stay quiet. The silence pressures you to respond. And in that response, you reveal information. You give them ammunition. But if you're comfortable with silence, the pressure reverses. Now they're the ones sitting in discomfort. Now they're the ones feeling the need to fill the void. And often they'll fill it by revealing more than they intended. They'll over-explain. Backtrack. Expose their real motives. All because you refuse to rescue them from silence. Toxic people hate this because it flips the script. They're used to controlling the rhythm of conversation. But silence disrupts rhythm. It creates space. And in that space, truth emerges. They can't perform in silence, can't manipulate without words. So they either retreat or expose themselves. Either way, you win. The sixth behavior is maintaining consistency. You are the same person in every situation. You don't change your values based on who's watching. You don't shift your boundaries based on who's asking. You don't perform different versions of yourself to please different audiences. You're just you. Consistent. Predictable in your integrity. Unpredictable in your tolerance for nonsense. And this is terrifying to toxic people because they rely on inconsistency. They look for gaps between your public self and private self. Between what you say and what you do. Between your stated values and your actual behavior. Those gaps are vulnerabilities. Leverage points. Blackmail material. But if you're consistent, there are no gaps. No contradictions to exploit. No hypocrisy to expose. You're the same behind their back as you are to their face. The same when it's convenient as when it's costly. That kind of integrity is bulletproof because toxic people can't threaten to expose what isn't hidden. Can't shame you for behavior you openly own. Can't manipulate someone who doesn't have a divided self to exploit. Consistency signals something deeper. You know who you are. You're not trying to be liked. You're not performing for approval. You're just existing in alignment with your values. And people who exist in alignment are immune to most manipulation, because manipulation requires internal conflict. It requires you doubting yourself. Second guessing. Wondering if maybe you're wrong. But consistent people don't doubt. They know. And that certainty is impenetrable. The seventh behavior is leaving without drama. When you're done, you're done. You don't announce it. You don't explain it. You don't give a final speech. You just quietly exit. No argument. No closure ritual. No opportunity for them to change your mind. You just become unavailable. Unreachable. Gone. And this is the most powerful move of all, because toxic people thrive on drama. The big confrontation. The emotional scene. The back and forth. That's where they manipulate best. They'll make promises. They'll apologize. They'll guilt you. They'll threaten. They'll do whatever it takes to keep you engaged. Because as long as you're engaged, they have a chance. But if you just leave silently, there's nothing to engage with. No argument to win. No explanation to refute. Just absence. And absence is final in a way that words never are. Words can be negotiated. Absence can. You're either there or you're not. And when you're not, they're powerless. This also protects you. Because staying to explain gives them data. They learn what hurt you, what bothered you, what your boundaries are. And they'll use that information to craft a better manipulation next time. But if you leave without explanation, they learn nothing. They're left guessing. And that uncertainty prevents them from adapting, from improving their tactics, from finding a way back in. Silent exit is permanent exit, and toxic people know it. These 7 behaviors aren't aggressive. They're not confrontational. They're just boundaries expressed through action instead of words. And action is always more powerful than words, because words can be argued with, actions can't. You either enforce your boundaries or you don't. You either stay emotionally neutral or you don't. You either maintain consistency or you don't. And toxic people can see the difference instantly. They know who's strong and who's pretending, and they avoid the strong ones. Because manipulation is a numbers game. Why waste energy on someone unbreakable when there are easier targets everywhere? Do these 7 things silently and you become invisible to toxic people. Not because you're hiding, because you're simply not worth their effort. And that's exactly where you want to be. There's a type of person toxic people avoid, not because they're loud or aggressive, because they're unshakable. These people don't argue, don't explain, don't defend. They just exist in a way that makes manipulators uncomfortable. And that discomfort is protection. Because toxic people are predators, and predators don't hunt what they can't break. Here are 7 silent behaviors that make you untouchable. The first behavior is emotional neutrality. You don't react. When someone tries to provoke you with insults, accusations, or drama, you stay calm. Not cold, not angry, just neutral. Your face doesn't change. Your voice doesn't rise. You don't take the bait. And this terrifies toxic people because their power comes from your reaction. They say something offensive and watch for the flinch, the defensive response, the emotional spike. That's the opening. That's where they insert the hook. But if you don't react, there's nothing to hook into. They're throwing punches at air. And manipulators hate wasting energy on targets that won't engage. Emotional neutrality isn't about suppressing your feelings. It's about choosing not to display them to people who weaponize them. You feel everything. You just don't show it. And that gap between internal experience and external presentation is where your power lives. Toxic people can't read you, can't predict you, can't control you. Because control requires understanding your triggers, and you're not giving them access. Studies in dark psychology show that manipulators specifically target people with visible emotional reactions. High reactivity equals high vulnerability. So they test you. They poke. They prod. And when nothing happens, they get nervous. Because someone who does unreact is someone who is either too strong to break or too aware to fool. Either way, they're dangerous, and toxic people avoid danger. The second behavior is enforcing boundaries without explanation. You say no, and that's the end of the sentence. No justification. No apology. No negotiation. Just no. And then silence. This is terrifying to toxic people because they rely on your explanations to find loopholes. If you say I can't because I'm busy, they'll tell you to reschedule. If you say I can't afford it, they'll offer payment plans. If you say I'm too tired, they'll minimize your exhaustion. Every reason you give is ammunition. But if you just say no and stop talking, there's nothing to argue with, nothing to manipulate around, just a boundary. Firm. Final. Unapologetic. Toxic people are used to boundaries being negotiable because most people feel guilty setting them. They soften them. They explain them. They leave room for pushback, but you don't. You state what you will and won't do, and you don't justify it. This signals something critical. You don't need their approval. You don't fear their judgment. You're not trying to make them understand. You're just informing them of reality. And people who operate from that level of self-assurance are impossible to guilt trip, impossible to pressure, impossible to manipulate. So toxic people don't even try. They move on to easier targets. The third behavior is selective availability. You're not always there. You don't answer every call. You don't respond to every text immediately. You don't drop everything when they need something. You have your own life, your own priorities, your own schedule, and their urgency doesn't automatically become yours. This drives toxic people insane because their manipulation often relies on immediacy. They create artificial urgency to bypass your critical thinking. I need this now. This can't wait. You have to decide right now. But if you're not immediately available, urgency loses power. You take time. You think. You make decisions on your terms. And by the time you respond, the pressure tactic is expired. Selective availability also communicates value. People who are always available are perceived as having nothing better to do. No options. No life outside this relationship. And that perception invites exploitation. But when you're selectively available, you signal the opposite. You're busy. You're in demand. Your time is valuable. And valuable people don't get treated like doormats. Toxic people want constant access, because constant access means constant control. But you deny them that, not through confrontation, just through unavailability. And that absence creates doubt. They start wondering if they matter to you, if they have leverage, if they're losing influence. And that doubt makes them retreat. Because toxic people need certainty. They need to know they can control you. And selective availability removes that certainty.